All right, all right. Welcome to today's incredible podcast. Today we have like an all-star team. We have Dr. Mary Neal, Howard Storm, and John Burke on today's podcast. And this is Howard Storm's podcast. It's going to go on this channel, potentially going to go on many of the channels, so I assume. So I don't know if you guys want to maybe introduce yourself, a summary about your near-death experiences and also the research you did, John Burke, and we could just go from there. So I'll start with you, Howard, if you want to introduce yourself and just a summary of your near-death experience as well.
Okay, I'm Howard Storm, and I had a near-death experience in June 1st, 1985 in Paris, France, in a medical situation. I died, and a group of people took me to hell and tormented me. And I'm making this all very abbreviated. And when they were done tormenting me and left me all torn up, I called upon Jesus to save me, and he came and took me out of there, took me up to an area outside of heaven, and called over a group of angels who gave me a life review. And when that was over, he invited me to ask questions. So I asked him everything that I could think of to ask him. It was an extremely life-changing education, because prior to my near-death experience, I thought I was an atheist. And after I recovered my health, after all this stuff, after a number of months, I went back to the university. And prior to going back to university, I started going to church. And I fell in love with the church and became very disillusioned with the university. So after a couple of years, I left my position as a full professor and a department head at the university and went to seminary for 3 years. And while I was at seminary, I also pastored churches as a student pastor, and ultimately spent 30 years pastoring churches and retired a few years ago. I now live with my wonderful wife in a retirement community in Cincinnati, Ohio.
Fabulous. Thank you so much. Dr. Mary Neal, do you want to introduce yourself?
Okay. Yeah. I will say Howard's is a very, very brief summary. I know his story, and that's pretty brief. So I'll try to keep it similarly brief, but my experience was very, very different than Howard's. I am a spine surgeon, and I wouldn't have said at the time of my near-death experience that I'd been an atheist, but I was certainly a rationalist and materialist. I mean, I was a scientist for sure. And when I was kayaking in South America, I drowned. And I was underwater for almost 30 minutes. And that's when I had my near-death experience that similarly was radically life-changing. And it's not that I was a jerk and then became a different person. But nonetheless, it was a very profound change, because I was underwater. I drowned. I knew I was underwater too long to be alive. And like Howard and like many people, I turned to God. I asked that God's will be done, and that changed everything. And I also underwent a life review that, again, was very different than Howard's, but very profound, and was then taken out of my body and taken to a place that I would call heaven, and reunited with people who had known and loved me as long as I've existed. And I, like many people, I mean, I had no intention of coming back. I had this overwhelming sense of being home, being where I really belong, where we all really belong. And I mean, it was glorious beyond one's description. I mean, there aren't words to describe something that isn't of this world. I mean, it's a shift in time, dimension. Time doesn't really exist. And so I could be with these people, but still be aware of my physical body in the kayak. And I could feel the weight and pressure of the water. I could feel the plastic of the boat. Once I left my body, I could see the people trying to get to me and then ultimately pulling my body to shore and doing CPR. But I was watching that sort of in a very detached manner. I mean, I was looking at that going, oh, okay. I recognize that as my body and my life and everything about Earth. But despite having a great life, I mean, I had a great husband. I had four young children who I loved really more than anything, more than life itself. And I had a great job. I had no issues. I mean, I had everything in the world to come back for. But despite that, I was home. It was like I'd gone on this long journey to Earth, and now I was home, and I wasn't planning on coming back. But instead, I was given this very remarkable experience of experiencing beauty that is a beauty that moves my soul. It's color and flowers and the aromas of flowers and the things that speak very profoundly to me. And it was just another example of how God knows each one of us individually, like all the billions of us on the planet individually, and loves each of us more than we can understand. And eventually I came to what I knew was the point of no return and was there for what felt like many, many hours or days, years, I don't know. Time didn't exist. Everything was in the present. And similar to Howard, I mean, I had to just think of a question and I had a complete understanding. I had a complete understanding, not necessarily of the divine nature of the universe, but certainly the divine order, how it could really be possible. How does it work? How is it that there really is a God that is real and present and working in my life, working in your lives, working in the world? How is it when there are billions of us? How can all the ecosystems, all of, not just people, but all of the natural world be in such perfect balance? And I can't explain it to you now, but I can tell you that during that time, I had a complete understanding of how that all works and the absolute awesomeness in the true sense of that word, absolute awe at the perfection and delicacy of it all. And eventually I was told, like most people, that it wasn't my time, that I had more work to do on Earth. And I like to say, I mean, my kids always said, oh, that's when I got kicked out. And so then I was taken back to my body and reunited. But before that, I, of course, asked, well, why? Why can't I stay? Why do I have to go back? And I am a very analytical and concrete thinking sort of person. I don't have much creativity. And so I was basically given a to-do list of work yet to be done. And many people ask, well, it was just an impression. No. This was basically like a list, number one, number two, number three. And certainly, I will tell you that everything on that list was or will be challenging to me. Everything has or will push me out of my comfort zone. And there's not anything on that list that I thought, oh, that's great. I can do that. That'll be fun. Everything was going to challenge me in some way or another. And certainly one of the most challenging things on the list had to do with the coming and unexpected death of my oldest son, who at the time was only 9 and healthy. There was no reason to think that he was going to die young. And everything having to do with that, the expectations of how I was going to respond to that, the expectations of how I was going to use his death to reflect God's love to the world, to other people, how I was going to use that to, I mean, inspire is the nice way of saying it, but more often than not, it's provoke people into thinking about their spiritual life and thinking about the truth of God and what it means to them, the truth of life after death, and how that can radically transform their life now, today. Because I know that we're meant to live a joy-filled life. And so part of being here today, part of being kicked out of heaven is doing that work, is really trying to inspire, provoke, motivate people to do the work of transformation so that they can live the joy-filled life that I believe we're meant to live. So that's a nutshell version. And now we'll pass it over to John.
Well, I'm fascinating because I've heard your story a ton of times and I've never heard the list. So I want to hear more of the list. Was it all having to do with your son?
No, not at all.
Oh,
No, it
okay.
had to do with a lot of different things, some of which have come to pass, some of which have not.
And you brought it all back? You knew the list when you came back?
Yes,
Ah,
right.
fascinating.
Not
Okay.
happily. But
That's amazing. Amazing summary, by the way. Both of you, incredible. You must have shared your stories maybe 1,000 times more, over the last 10, 20 years.
probably, but you know what? One of the beautiful things is that I think that spiritual experiences occur in the present tense. And
Mm,
so I think that when Howard describes his, when I describe mine, when anyone who has had a profound spiritual experience, be it an NDE, deathbed visitation, anything like that, I think the beauty of it is that we're describing it in the present tense. It's not a memory. Like I'm not pulling out a memory and trying to remember what happened. I remember it very precisely because it's in the present tense. I mean,
amazing.
if you asked me about the day my son died, I'd be able to relate it pretty clearly because it was a profound experience. Or the day I got married, or the day I had a baby, you're going to remember today forever.
Yeah.
But as you describe today in the years coming, you're going to remember some of the details just a little bit differently, or you're going to pull out different words to use. You're going to obviously remember it very clearly, but not necessarily precisely. But one of the beautiful things I think about profound spiritual experiences is that the memories are precise. Typically, we use the same adjectives, the same adverbs to describe it. And I think it's because I mean, I'd like to know Howard's input, but I think that when people describe profound spiritual experiences where God is actually present, they remember it in the present tense because time doesn't exist in a spiritual realm.
Right.
So, anyway, that was a
No,
little diversion.
that's a gem right there. You want to say something about that, Howard?
Yeah, I think Mary said it very well that it is outside of time. So in heaven, everything is in the present tense. It's kind of hard for people to understand that although the past and the future do exist in God's mind, in heaven, everything is now, right now. And one of the things that I've been working on and that a lot of spiritual people work on is trying to be very present in the now. I try to not live in the past. I try not to live in the future. I try to live in the right now. Of course, I do have to think about things like what time is the podcast today and stuff like that. But being present in the moment, I think, is very undervalued in our society. And with the way things are going in our culture, I think a lot of people aren't present at all. They're living in the past and the future and missing this moment. And part of this moment is being with another person and loving them and listening to them and appreciating them. Trying our very best to empathize with them, understand them.
That's amazing. That's amazing. Are you ready, John?
I'm ready. Yeah, so just a little about me. I did not have a near-death experience or any radical spiritual transforming experience. I was an analytical engineer, and I was an agnostic when I was not an engineer when my dad was dying of cancer, but I've always had that kind of questioning mind, like, how do you know? And, can you prove it? And, give me some reasons. And my dad was dying of cancer. Someone gave him Moody's book, Life After Life, which is the very first research that coined the term near-death experience. And I read it in one night, and it opened my mind to consider God, because so many of them experienced God and even Jesus. And so I was invited into a home Bible study that later that year. And I think I had said no already before, but I think because of that, I said yes, and brought all my questions, started asking them. And over the course of that year, I came to faith in Christ, and ended up going from a career in engineering to becoming a pastor. Over the last, I keep saying 35 years. My wife said, you keep saying that for like a decade. It's been longer. So I don't know, 40 years or so, I have had this just compulsive curiosity to understand what a near-death experience is and how it relates to the things I had learned in the Bible. And things I'd learned about God and the history of God, and other evidence that God is real, completely separate from near-death experiences. And so I actually gave my first talk on how the Bible and near-death experiences correlate in 1989 at the University of California, Santa Barbara. So it's been a long time, but I didn't actually write on it until 2015 when I wrote Imagine Heaven, where I was trying to show I've charted out about 40 commonalities that near-death experiencers consistently describe. And I'm showing how all 40 of them are found in the scriptures' expectation of the afterlife. So and I continue to research and write. In fact, I passed the leadership of the church, which Mary knew was coming. All the way from, I think we've been talking about it since 2015, right?
Yep.
But I did, and my wife and I are full time, really trying to bring to the global world the reality that I think God is raising up testimony of Himself in every nation all over the world through these near-death experiences, kind of as a, I don't know if it's his Hail Mary or what, but
I love it. I love it.
It's kind of like, hey, look,
Right.
It's me. I've always been the God of all nations. I want all my children coming home. I've done what I did through Jesus for that. Just turn back to me. So that's what we're about now.
That's amazing. That's incredible. And thank you for your amazing work. I know that millions of people have benefited from Imagine Heaven, Imagine the God of Heaven, and all the testimonies you've brought together have been quite amazing, actually, as well.
Well, and these two people are two of my favorite.
Yeah, I know. Me too.
Stories, but also two of my favorite people.
I agree with you. So I wanted to ask, of course, the $1 million question about Jesus. This is very important in your near-death experience, and I suppose maybe from the time you encountered him to the present day, who is Jesus to you and how has he been important in your life? Go ahead, Howard.
Thank you for asking that, because I've been, for some reason, burning to want to talk about Jesus. When I went to seminary, I took very early on Theology 101, and the first day of class, the professor said, God is a mystery, and that anything you say about God is false because there are no words that can accurately describe God. And I'm recounting some of the things he said, like, for example, to say God is good is actually an injustice to God, because God is far beyond good. To say God, I mean, anything that we can formulate in language is actually demeaning to what God really is. And that made a very powerful impact on me. Now, after saying that, I believe, as all Christians believe, that approximately 2,000 years ago, God came into the world fully human, fully divine, in the person of Jesus of Nazareth. And that God did this because for well more than 1,000 years, as God had been trying to get the people of Israel to bring the knowledge of a monotheistic God and a loving God into the world. And they were doing an extremely poor job of it. And unfortunately, a lot of the understanding of what God taught them had turned into a lot of really strident self-righteousness and closed offness to the rest of the world. So God took the dramatic step of bringing Jesus of Nazareth into the world to reveal the true nature of God. So I believe, based on my understanding of the Bible, that Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John are the perfect, complete revelation of God for human beings. Jesus Christ reveals to us everything that we need to know about God. Now I want to step back to my near-death experience. The Jesus that I met was the most wonderful, kindest, friendliest person I've ever met in my life. And I don't mean this to be sacrilegious. In my relationship with Jesus, he's my best friend. He's my greatest friend. He's a wonderful sense of humor. He's not judgmental. He's completely honest. He's patient. And being God, he knows everything, and anything you want to know, you can learn from him, and he will explain it in a way that you can understand it. Some of the questions that I asked him, they were too erudite for me to understand. So I said, it's hard for me to understand. He said, and so he would say, okay, it's like a garden. And he would explain to me the answer to my question by using garden as a metaphor. Anyways, I said we cannot understand God because God is so much more than anything that we could possibly encapsulate in terms of language. But the man, Jesus, who was fully human and fully God, we can understand. And what he did in this world in his very short ministry of approximately 3 years was world changing. And the whole point of all of this is that God created human beings, and God gave human beings lots of gifts, like the ability to be rational and the ability to be creative. And one of the gifts that God gave humanity was free will. And we were given that gift in the Garden of Eden by eating the fruit from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. And prior to that, we were innocent. We were gardeners in God's garden. And when we ate from the knowledge of good and evil, we could choose between good and evil. And so the history of humankind, ever since the expulsion from the Garden of Eden, is that we have very often chosen to rebel against God, to react against God, to do evil. Even from the first moment when Adam and Eve went and hid from God. And so what is going on right now, and it's been going on for several thousand years, is God is trying to make out of Homo sapiens the children of God. I like to think of it as God is trying to turn us into real human beings, real children of God, people that live in love and harmony and love God, know Jesus and love Jesus, and really important, love the creation and live harmoniously with the creation. That's what's happening. That's the big plan, and it's called what we Christians pray theoretically every Sunday, if not way more often, in the Lord's Prayer. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. We are trying to bring the kingdom of God into this world. And that's what God is working towards. That's where we're headed. And although it looks very discouraging and bleak sometimes, we're actually moving in that direction. And it's through the Christian faith that is coming about.
Amen. Well, that's amazing. Thank you for sharing that out with us. Very compassionate and a lot of passion there. How about you, Dr. Neal? What would you say?
Oh, man. It's hard to follow up after Howard. And that's an obviously very big question. And we could talk for a couple of hours or more just on that one question. But I will just say, we don't have time for the whole discussion, but I do believe that Jesus was God incarnate. I think it's interesting that when people encounter a spiritual being in their near-death experiences, they always identify it as God or as Jesus. Nobody ever comes back describing any of the other people, Buddha, Muhammad, etc. Jesus is God that shows up. And Jesus showed up in mine. And I have to tell you, I was as surprised as anyone would be. I mean, I wasn't a bad person, but, we have this idea that we have to earn God's love, etc. John spent his lifetime as a pastor doing God's will. And he said earlier, he has not had a profound spiritual experience. And so it's not fair. I mean, John.
Although I also don't have a tracheotomy like you do.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Everyone has something, right? But no, the thing I focus on when it comes to Jesus's existence, his ministry, his death, and his resurrection is that I look at that as God keeping a promise. I mean, God expressing his love for us. For so long, for thousands of years, people struggled. And Howard brought up the Garden of Eden. I think God knew we were going to eat that apple. I mean, we're born with intellectual curiosity, and it was just a matter of when.
Yeah.
But regardless, we went through life, lots of struggles. And I think part of his sending Jesus to earth was to show us a different way of living. Because I do believe that what God wants for us is living in joy, living a life in which we know we are loved and which we can freely love other people. And Jesus came here, showed us how to live differently, and then, of course, was murdered, and the story didn't end. He was resurrected. And it was this promise keeping. Life is not the end. We really do continue on afterward. And I think that very fact, forget everything else, the fact that life continues on should make people think. Because if there is life after death, then it sort of necessarily starts you down the path of wondering, well, okay, then why am I here today? What's the point of today? And I think that as you start wrestling with that question, it necessarily ends up with God. And it points to God, it points to love, it points to our purpose of being here, of sharing and reflecting that love to other people. I think that it's very difficult to have a conversation about Jesus, about Jesus incarnate, because as Howard started out saying, there is nothing that we can say about God that is understandable because we don't have the language. I mean, language is one of my personal interests. I love language. I love the purpose of language and words to communicate. But in loving language, I also fully recognize the limitations of language. I can talk about what Jesus looked like to me, but it's nonsensical because time didn't exist and Jesus looked like everything. I do believe that we are creations, and I believe that we are created in God's image. Well, you look at the four of us on screen, and this screen could have 1,000 people or 1,000,000 people, and no two people look the same. So, of course, you can't actually pin down what Jesus looks like. I grew up in Michigan, so I grew up with the blonde-haired, blue-eyed Jesus. But that's just not credible for the actual human being Jesus. But Jesus in the spiritual realm, in my experience, was all of those things, all at the same time, every skin color, every hair color, every eye color, every personality, all of it balled up into one and experienced simultaneously. And so going back, I mean, that's nonsensical because we live here and we live in a sequential chronological world, but that's not the same. So we don't even have the words. So even though I look to the Gospels for much of the description of what Jesus did and said, I also fully recognize the limitation of language because, I mean, Jesus, for example, didn't use punctuation. He didn't even have commas and paragraphs and verses. And so the first person to even make a written record had their handprint on it. They interpreted by putting commas in different places. Mm-hmm. And so I think that I certainly look to what Jesus did. I look to what he said as guidance for sure. But I also think that you have to look at sort of the underlying layers. I mean, what did Jesus's death and resurrection do? Well, it was a great example of God keeping his promises. God promises us that we are loved. God promises us that we are never alone, and on down the list. There are all these promises. And, the problem is it's really hard for us to believe it. And I think that, a big part of Jesus coming was trying to get us to believe, like, no, actually, God is who God says he is. And even, using him. I mean, I have to choose a pronoun. That's another problem with language. I mean, we can only try to describe things and try to explain things the best we can with English language. I mean, even talking about love. you know, I mean, I hate even making, using that word because it's really more appropriate to talk about aspects of love, like compassion, sympathy, empathy, understanding, all those other words, because all of those words are reflective of love at their core.
Yeah.
And I don't know, I've sort of gotten off on a tangent, but
It's
um,
Well, I'll tell you,
oh well.
one thing Jesus said to you that gives me a lot of hope. You said I haven't had any big spiritually transformative experiences, but I love it that Jesus quoted himself to you when you ask him, why don't you just give everybody this experience and then they'll all believe?
Right. Yeah. I mean,
What and what
that was a
and
big
he
question for
quoted
me.
what he said to Thomas, right?
Right. Exactly. And there is power in doing the work to choose to believe, and it's trust. I mean, I can trust God's promises and God's presence because I have experienced it firsthand. And most people would say that they haven't had that experience. But I would contend that everyone has that experience. You just don't recognize it.
Mhm.
Miracles do occur in every person's life, whether they acknowledge them, whether they recognize them, and most importantly, whether they remember them. I mean, God is present. And you can look back at your life, and if you keep a record or if you start writing things down, you can so clearly see God's presence. There is no coincidence. I mean,
Yeah.
it's a statistical game at a certain point. You start to line up all the events that led to, I don't know, something big, meeting your spouse or something like that. And at a certain point, if you looked at the statistical odds of each event, you would come to realize that it would be impossible outside of divine guidance, divine intervention, whatever words and terms you want to use.
Mhm.
But
Can I
yeah,
throw
I
a little,
mean,
can I
there's
throw a
there's
little
great
theological,
power.
I'd like to throw a little theological slant on this. Um, I learned from, I listened to a lot of theology and spiritual books and stuff like that. And I learned from someone, God is not a noun. God is not an object. God is a verb. God is being. And I love that idea of God is being, and that God is present throughout the entire universe, and God is present throughout everything in this world. And I just want to clarify for anyone who wants to be super critical about what I'm saying. I am not talking about pantheism. I'm not saying that God is everything like what the Hindus believe. I'm saying God is entheistic, that God is with everything. And wonderful book by Richard Rohr about the Spirit of Christ is with everything in this world. And one of the things that I like to do, and I've been doing this for a long time, even before I read Richard Rohr, was trying to see the in everybody that I met. And you know what? There is the Spirit of Christ in everybody, even in the most rotten, despicable person you meet. There is the Spirit of Christ in them. And part of my job has been, and I've encouraged others to do this as a pastor, is to search for that Spirit of Christ in everybody that you meet, and to try and be the Spirit of Christ with everybody you meet.
Yeah. It's interesting. I was thinking almost along the same lines of what you were saying, Howard, because one of the things that I think theologically has shifted for me in studying so many near-death experiences, though I don't think it's unbiblical, I think it actually has helped me see what the Bible's saying. Um, is my Christian theology early on was that God is with you if you've accepted him in your life, and then his spirit lives in you.
Yes.
And the corollary that was maybe not always stated, but maybe yes, it was, is, and if you haven't, then he's not with you at
Mm.
all. And, and in fact, he probably doesn't even hear your prayers except the one, sinner's prayer. And I've come to realize that that's not biblical. at all.
No.
And studying so many of you guys has helped me because of how many times Jesus would say to someone, I'm with you always. Or even like in the case of Randy Kay, who's the CEO that I had interviewed, where he was an agnostic. He was trying to disprove God. Well, is it Northwestern and get all his friends to see how stupid it was to believe in God. And Jesus is showing him in his life review that he was there with him. And he's like, you were there with me? He said, I've always been there with you, just waiting for you to turn to me.
Yeah.
And I think, and the important part of that, I think, is, and I mean, scripturally, that's true. I mean, in him we live and move and have our being. It says in Acts 17, but also I think it's in Colossians that, you know, Jesus is the very word that sustains our very being. There's nothing that exists without him. And I think part of the thing that we can see then is that, and hellish near-death experiences have helped me see this. What so many I've interviewed who have hellish near-death experiences say, even though they didn't believe in God, they said, what I realized is I'm being torn away from God. And to be torn away from God is to be torn away from all love, hope, gentle kindness, patience, beauty, goodness, everything that we love about this life, it gets ripped away the farther you go. And so what that means, and another near-death experiencer said, is that you don't realize how God is actually with you, sustaining you, but also blessing you. The things you enjoy are all gifts from God, and we just don't recognize it. Like he is with you, and he's enjoying you, even enjoying the gifts he's given you. But too many times, like it says in Romans 1, we didn't give him thanks. And then we just go our own way and our minds become darkened.
Yep, I totally agree with you. I absolutely reject the notion that God is only with the people who pray the right way, believe the right way, do the right things. God, we are God's, whether we acknowledge it or not. And I think that's what you're getting to, which is you can acknowledge God's presence in your life or not. That's free will.
Well, wait, did you mean we belong to God?
We're created. I mean, we are God's, period. I don't care who we are, what we do, what we believe.
Are you saying that
I
with a
believe
big
we are
G or a little
created
G?
beings.
Is that a
Pardon?
big G or a little G? We
A
are
big
God's.
G,
Are you saying that with a capital G or a small G?
a capital G.
Oh, I don't agree with that.
Wait,
Well,
So
I don't,
do you?
you can't tell me that my little grandson does not belong to God.
That's what I
Oh,
meant.
I'm
That
not
little
saying that
boy
at all.
belongs
I'm
to
not
Yeah,
saying
God.
that at
no.
all. I'm
Period.
just saying your little grandson's not God.
No. We belong to God.
Yeah.
We
That's
are
what I was
not
trying to
God.
clarify.
No, and that's no. I think I'm saying the same thing you are, John, which is I believe every person on this planet belongs to God. Not that we are God. Like
Right. Yeah.
that whole idea, I mean, my son has my DNA, but he's never going to be me.
Right.
It's not possible. I'm never going to be God, even though, yes, I believe that I am created by God. I have my soul, my spirit, my essence, whatever you want to call it, that comes from God. And that is what makes me human. It makes me me. It makes me God's creation. And I
Yeah.
believe that's true of every person on this planet, no matter who they are, no matter whether they acknowledge that or want to acknowledge, whether they want it to be true or not. The
Yeah.
fact of the matter is,
I would
they
like
do.
to tell a little story about the importance of God in your life. About a year ago, I had an aneurysm blow out and threw clots into my right leg, into the artery. I went to the emergency of the hospital in great pain, and in the next week, I had 5 surgeries where they tried to clear out some of the clots. They were all failures. They told my wife several times during these 5 surgeries that I died a number of times, and they resuscitated me. I was in tremendous pain during this whole process, and ultimately they amputated my leg with my permission. The point that I wanted, that's the medical situation. The point that I want to make is that during that time, I knew that I had a choice. It was a simple binary choice. I could become angry and bitter and go into blaming God and, just all this negativity. And I knew that if I did that, I would be falling into a dark pit. The other choice that I had to make was to stay as close to God and Jesus as I possibly could, and knowing that with their help that I would survive and get through all of this. So I consciously, every minute that I was consciously awake, I was praying to God. I was believing in God, believing in Jesus, that I would survive all this. And in fact, I did. And that's the difference that faith in God makes. It gives you the power to endure and to get through all the trials and tribulations of this world.
Yeah, no, I agree with you, Howard. And that's, one of my issues is exactly that, which is that, people, I think, incorrectly believe that, God is not part of people's lives unless you choose to invite him in. But I think there's this nuanced difference that I believe God is present in every person's life. But the difference between an atheist or agnostic's life or just an apathetic person's life and mine is that I get to experience great joy even in the midst of struggle and sorrow and difficulties. Whereas another person is going to experience those things and suffer and suffer and suffer and be depressed and all sorts of other things.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's the choice we truly get to make.
Yes.
Well, and I think there is and I've pondered this, what the difference is, but at the point of surrendering our lives to Christ or accepting him into our lives, trusting what he's done for us, he promises his Holy Spirit, who comes to live in us, in our spirit. So there's some differentiation that I still make anyway between God is with us, and in fact, God, I believe, is the life force that keeps all of it going. He is transcendent of his whole creation, but like Howard was also saying, he's also immanent. He's also always present in all things, which I think also, interestingly, people have said, well, the Bible says that no one has seen God. So how can these near-death experiencers claim that they've seen God? To which I reply, well, Jesus knew, saying that Isaiah had been taken to the throne room and seen God, that Daniel had seen a form of God, which I think might have been the angel of the Lord, probably Jesus, pre-incarnate. And that but that what that means is that God is infinite, eternal, light, love. You can't corral infinity into anything we can see or understand. And I think that's even true on the other side. You guys can tell me if you think I'm wrong there, but like, even those who see the Father on the throne are seeing a manifestation of God for the heavenly inhabitants, but that's still not the infinite, eternal.
Yeah. No, I agree. I think
agree,
God speaks to us in a way we can understand.
So Jesus is like the revelation for us on earth.
Right. We can only understand what we can understand.
Yeah.
And I think about my near-death experience. I think about other people's death experiences. I do believe there is tremendous spiritual crossover. I think it's not like we live here and heaven's over here. we are within the midst of the spiritual realm, and there is crossover, but unless it's in a way that we can understand, then we miss it. And so in a near-death experience, I mean, the beauty that I saw and experienced, what that really was an expression of love, of making me feel known and valued and cherished. It had nothing to do with the physicality of it, but it was one expression because it's something that I would understand as love. And so I would agree with you. I mean, people who say they see God, I think they're seeing a manifestation that they will understand and that will change them.
Yeah.
So, but when you were underwater, you knew it was Jesus.
Yeah.
Right?
Can I build on that question actually? Because I was going to go there. I was going to say there's a similarity between Dr. Mary Neal's story and Howard's story, is that they were held by Christ. So when Dr. Mary Neal was underwater, she said she felt absolutely, correct me if I'm wrong, absolutely held by him and comforted by him, and also was assured that the kids were going to be fine and the husband was going to be fine. And also when Howard was in hell and cried out to Jesus and he saw the light coming with incredible speed towards him, he saw two hands coming out to pick him up from the darkness of hell, and he was held, and he said he was crying so hard on the shoulders of Jesus and also held by him. And I was going to ask the question, number one, what does it feel like to be held by him, comforted by him? And is that also available for everyone who's on earth right now, to be comforted by Christ?
What it felt like was it felt like being held by this most wonderful, loving man. Although he was surrounded by white light, when he held me, I could feel his body, my arms around him, his arms around me. He felt like a very muscular, tall man. But there's two things that are very subjective that I want to add. It's that one of the things that I knew almost immediately is that he liked me a lot. I never knew that about Jesus. Nobody ever told me that Jesus liked me a lot. And I'm going to say something outrageous. Jesus loves me more than anybody else in the whole world. Now, that's true. I know that's an absurd statement, okay?
No,
but that's
true.
the way I feel. That's the way I feel. He loves me more than anybody could possibly love anything. So if you want to know what it feels like to be in the presence of Jesus, you feel like you are the only one, the most precious thing in the whole universe to him. Now, I know he feels that way. He feels that way about Mary. He feels that way about John. And he might feel that way about Addie. I don't
know. Maybe. But I would agree. I mean, for me, it was a very physical experience. Wow. And I wouldn't say it was a he. I mean, I say he because I have to choose something.
Yeah.
But just as my experience was that Jesus was every phenotypic expression of genetics. I mean, every skin color, hair color, eye color, etc., male and female. I mean, we are all creations of God, and I believe Jesus is a reflection of all of us.
Yeah.
But the closest thing the closest thing I've ever been able to think of is when you hold your little baby. And I have to say, for me, it wasn't necessarily as a newborn. I didn't, some people fall in love with their newborns. It took me a little while. but eventually, I mean, you hold that newborn in your arms and you look at it. And when they are locked on to your eyes, you experience the most profound, complete, absolute love. And you just, not only are you pouring all of your love into that little thing, but you're pouring your very being into that little baby. It's everything you are, everything you've ever been, everything you ever hope to be, everything. You're just looking down and pouring it into that little baby. And that's what it was like. I felt like the little baby, and everything, the entire universe was being poured into me. And there are no words. I mean, you can't describe it. There's no human experience, earthly experience, I don't think that can even equate to that.
But I
Except,
found it so interesting how many of you have said the same thing. Like Jim Woodford said, I knew it couldn't be true, but in his presence, I felt like I was the only one he
oh,
loved.
no, I was the only one.
Yeah, no, I was the only one.
And that's the beauty, I think. That's the incredible part of it, is I think that we all feel like we're the only one because it's in the present tense. Because I actually think that joy is discovered in each moment.
Mm.
And I think love, the intensity is the presence. It's this moment in time. We are each so deeply loved, so purely loved, and that's something that we don't experience here on earth. But it's true. We are perfectly loved and loved beyond all measure.
Well, and to a degree, don't you think, the thing that's missing on this earth is the fullness of the presence of God.
Yes.
Right.
And so when we're there, we are the only ones he's created for his love that we can receive. There's no other Mary that he created to receive his
Right.
love
Good point.
like you can. And so truly you are the only one. I am the only one.
Right.
And
Yeah.
so there's that completion, it seems like it, that I mean, what I've heard again and again is just like, this is the love I've always wanted. Like there are all kinds of hyperbole that you guys use, like take every love you've ever had from a spouse, for a baby, from a grandparent, put it all in one, blow it up times a billion.
Right. Yeah.
I hear that again and again, and but it makes sense, it makes sense because if everything on this earth is a reflection of the creator, and it's pretty evident just from the number of love songs that love is pretty significant,
Right. Yeah.
that God is the love that we've wanted, and that in that love, then all of our little L loves even grow and get deeper.
Right. I mean, if you think about the only truly, truly universal desire of human beings, and I might add of animals, plants, of any living thing, is love, is the need for love, the seeking of love, the desire of love, the desire to give love. I still remember and this is going to sound kind of goofy. I still remember this experiment that was done, and I read about this when I was in probably middle school, which was a long time ago. And these scientists set up two greenhouses, and in one greenhouse, in both they were growing the same plants. I don't remember what kind of plant. One greenhouse, they played hard rock music, like heavy metal stuff. And the other green plant house, they went in every day and they told the plants how beautiful they were and how much they loved them and how, strong they were and all the, beautiful, loving adjectives. And not surprisingly, the plants in the greenhouse that felt loved thrived. And the plants that were exposed to the yelling and the heavy metal, they shriveled up.
Are you telling me
So
I'm not loving my plants enough?
apparently, and that's why I go out and I tell my plants how much I love them. But no, it's just an interesting thing because universally, when you look at people who wreak havoc on others or the world, they're typically broken people who, for one reason or another, didn't feel loved or
Yeah,
don't currently feel loved.
absolutely.
I mean,
Yep.
love is the root of basically everything, and everything grows from there.
Well, and back to what we were talking about before, I've found that a more effective way of leading people to faith in Christ is to help them see how much God already loves them and that he's already with them and he's just waiting for them to turn to him.
Right.
And that they just don't realize it, but he's been showering them with good gifts, and all the love they've ever experienced is just borrowed from him through the people around them.
But I want to add that in looking at my youth, there was a great deception going on in my youth and my generation. I was a baby boomer. I was in San Francisco in the 60s during the hippie revolution. Drugs, sex, rock and roll, right? Hedonism. And the big deception is that the meaning of the word love. We thought love was sex. Okay, if I can be brutally honest, I thought love was when a girl would let me have my way with her. That's what I thought love was. And then there was also what my father loved more than anything else. He loved money. He loved money. That's all he loved was money. And some people love power, like our good friend Vladimir Putin. He loves being, powerful over, the Ukraine and other things. So there is when we all have been using the word love a lot during the past time, but we're talking about unconditional love. We're talking about agape love. We're not talking about sexual love. We're not talking about love of material things or love of controlling other people. So that's one of the difficult things about language. And we're all painfully aware of that because we all work with words. I understand the Eskimos have 200 words for different kinds of snow, right? In Latin, there's three words to describe 3 different kinds of love. In English, we need some new words to describe the love that we're talking about.
Yeah.
Right.
Something that's very interesting. I love that you're all talking about love. And I think Dr. Neal mentioned about promise as well earlier on. And there's something as well that's very common to both of your near-death experiences that I wanted you to comment about. It's the future. But the near future, for example, with Howard, I remember that you said some angels came to your hospital room to tell you that you were going to get better, and that Jesus told you you're going to get better. You're going to have to be in the hospital. It's going to be difficult, but you have to go through the process. And that for a while, you didn't even want to take anything to get better because you just wanted to be back with Jesus until you traveled back to America and, sort of like got your health back. So even though the promise of getting better was there, you had to go through the process, and it was very difficult. And same for Dr. Neal, of course, you were told about the passing away of your son at the time. And even though you knew in advance, going through that process, there was still the grief that you said you had to go through. And I wanted you guys to maybe comment about the reality of God making a promise about something's going to get better or something's going to happen versus actually experiencing it. And how does one, because for a lot of times people feel God saying, you have a bright future, for example. I want amazing things to happen to you. But when, the hard times come, and they do for almost all of humanity, how do you go through that process, even though you know God is for you and he likes you like you're the only one in the world? How do you, sort of bridge that gap?
Well, let me I answer that, I think, briefly. Everything in life is a choice. Every moment of our life, we have the opportunity to make choices. And so when I was going through stuff after my near-death experience and going through the stuff that I mentioned about my amputation and things like that, I always knew that I had a choice. And my choice was to either hang tight with God and Jesus or to turn my back on them. And like one of the ways that I did that was when I was in the hospital in 1985, and when I was in the hospital a year ago, I refused to take pain medication because pain medication fogs your brain up, makes you goofy, and I didn't want to be goofy. And I didn't like the pain, but I also found a way to get rid of the pain too with the help of God. The other thing that I did was I made a conscious effort to be cheerful and funny with every single person that came into the room. And when I left Christ Hospital, after being there several months with the amputation, all the nurses and orderlies and doctors and cleaning ladies, they all came to say goodbye to me. And they all told me that I was the nicest patient they'd ever had. And I said, why are you saying that? And they said, because you were always cheerful and funny and appreciated the things that we did for each other. And I said, well, everybody, all your patients are that way. And they said, no, most patients are mean and nasty and rude. And they said, you were the nicest one. And I said, well, I was just trying to be that way. I mean, it wasn't like I'm naturally a good person or anything. I was just trying to be, nice to be around. Anyways, it was very rewarding that they felt that I had been a good patient. By the way, my mother was a nurse and my sister was a nurse, so I had a certain amount of empathy for nurses.
Hey, Howard, I'm just curious because I know everyone on your channel knows this, but maybe others listening to it don't. But after the amputation, then you lost your eyesight within a year.
Yeah.
How have you dealt with that?
It's been an incredible adjustment because I was a visual person. I have been a professional artist all my life, and ironically, in the past couple of years, the commissions have been starting to roll in. And so I was basically churning out the paintings and selling them for good money. And it was very gratifying because all my life I wanted to be known as an artist more than anything else. And so that's, of course, all out the window. But the interesting thing on the positive side, by not having any eyesight, which according to biology books say 90% of the information about the world comes in through your eyes. I've lost all that, but there's other ways to know the world and to know people, and that's spiritually, verbally, just being around people. So I have a different way of interacting with the world, and it's very rich and it's very rewarding. So I'm trying to make the best of that.
Well, I think it's amazing too, the way, you're fighting back. Like,
Yeah.
the world and the evil one is, like you told me one time, trying to take you apart piece by piece, but
Yep.
you're fighting by pointing people to the source. Yeah. Yeah.
I think Howard is a good example of, I approach it much more concretely. And for me, it's all about trust. And it's a matter of whether or not in any given situation, do you trust the promises God has made to us? Do you trust that, your past is gone? You're forgiven, you're understood, there's grace. Do you understand that God has a future for each one of us and for the world that is one of hope, that there is a perfect plan for each one of us or not? I mean, there are all these promises like that you can do the work to decide for yourself whether you choose to trust or not. But once you collect that data and you decide, yes, I have enough data in my own life to trust God's promises that have been made to all of us, then I think that trust, which I might add, you got to keep renewing it. It's not a one and done. But I think with every situation that comes up, Howard talks about making a conscious choice. But I think it's beyond that. I think that it's making a conscious choice based on your conscious choice of choosing to trust God's promises.
Yep.
I mean, similarly, I mean, everyone has stuff. I mean, I don't think things happen that are good or bad. Things happen and they challenge us in different ways. But if you trust God's promises to us, you know that whatever challenge it is changing you, changing your family, changing the world, whatever it is, in ways that are going to be amazing. I mean, if we can each look back at our lives and see things that we thought were horrible, things that happened, things that didn't happen. And in the moment, we thought it was terrible. But retrospectively, we can look back and be so grateful for whatever it is that happened, because it sent us either on a different trajectory, or it meant we were available for something even greater that God had in mind for us. I mean, with medical issues, similar to Howard, I mean, it's always a matter of choice. It's always a matter of choosing. I had this operation on my thyroid, and the guy injured the nerve to my vocal cords. And so I couldn't speak, period. I couldn't speak. I couldn't even talk to my children on the phone. I mean, it was horrible. And I had all kinds of other associated medical issues with that. And I found that I was starting to go, oh my gosh, my life is ruined. Because, of course, I couldn't practice. I couldn't be a spine surgeon if I can't talk. I can't talk to patients. I couldn't do speaking. I couldn't do anything. And literally, I couldn't even talk to my children. That's really a challenging situation.
Yeah.
And I found myself one day going, oh, okay, you sure talk a lot about trust. Well, do you trust or don't you? And that is a conscious choice. And I said, okay, fine. You know what, God, if this is my path, if I'm not going to speak again, then show me some other way that I can glorify you and reflect your love to this world. And I think that it's that conscious choice to say, you know what, God does have a plan for each of us. It's going to include challenges because, I mean, we bring on challenges. We create all the problems of the world and we have to respond to it. But we can make this conscious choice to trust that whatever it is either changing us, changing our families, changing the world. It's setting us on a different path. I mean, whatever it is that's happening real time, we can still experience incredible gratitude and incredible joy for that trust that we know the future is going to bring.
Yeah, I got a good idea. Maybe we should write on our dollar bills, we trust in God.
Yeah, exactly.
Sound like an idea?
Right.
John,
good idea.
John, I was going to ask you, from your research and study on the near-death experiences, especially talking about some of the foreknowledge, for example, they told Dr. Mary Neal was going to happen. So she had to trust, even though that happened. Same with Howard Storm as well. That conscious choice. Can you shed some light for us on God's foreknowledge? Some people in the body of Christ believe. Some people in the body.
Oh yeah, I understand it perfectly.
Of course, and some people in the body of Christ believe predestination. 100%. So
here. So interestingly, I was actually just researching today another near-death experience where the Lord said to her, if you can choose to stay or you can go back. If you go back, I need to show you some things that might happen. Some of them will definitely happen, but some of them will depend on other people's free will choices. But you won't remember any of them, but you need to know that before you make your choice, basically, to go back. And I think, what I've written about is that anytime we try to say, well, we have free will, i.e., that means God can't be sovereign because he's then subjected to our will. And so therefore people will say, no, we don't really have a free will because God is sovereign. And I think the whole problem is that um, we're trying to talk about things in a time-bound perspective when in fact these things are revealed to us from outside of our time, one dimension of linear time. So God, I mean, the way I try to describe it is we're in this one-dimensional linear time moving forward. You can never go back. But if on the other side you experience two dimensions of time, at each point on the timeline, there's another line going in this direction that you can stay on for all the time in the world at each moment of that time. And so even two-dimensional time would feel like you've got all the time in the world, or there's no time as we feel it because nothing's ever rushed. But then if you had three dimensions of time, you take that our one-dimensional timeline and imagine it's like the equator of a globe, and then the second dimensions are the longitudinal lines that go up to the North Pole, and then the North Pole is that third dimensional moment in time. And from that moment in time, you would experience the beginning and the end of our time simultaneously and all times in between.
Wow.
And so I think, when God says, I'm the Alpha and the Omega, the beginning and the end, that's what we're talking about. And so he can sovereignly see every choice because he's at all points in time and above and beyond it all with a will of his own. So the trouble with us talking about it is both are true. And there are just as many verses in the Bible about God's sovereignty as there are about our free will.
Yeah.
But I think also, go ahead. I mean, you bring up predestiny, and predestiny is very different than having this ideal plan or God trying to make good of something we've done. Predestiny, I mean, I've never understood it, because if every single moment of every day of our life is pre-planned, what is the point?
Well, that's
what's the point of being here?
Determinism.
We're puppets. We're just puppets.
Yeah, that would be useless.
And that's determinism, and that's not in the Bible at all.
No, not at all.
Yeah.
I mean, I
love
the water. Go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, but at the same time, God has a will, and his will acts in at least three dimensions of time on our time-bound perspective. And so his perfect plan does work, but John, it involves 8 billion.
John, I want to add something. Love is never controlling. It's not coercive.
Exactly.
My wife and I have a very good relationship, and it's because we respect each other and we try not to be cruel to each other. But if I said to my wife, if you don't clean this house this afternoon, I'm going to shoot you in the leg. How do you think that would go over? God is not controlling. He's not coercive, because the very nature of love, the very definition of love, is freely given.
Yep.
So much for the will of God. What we want to do is we, of course, want to understand and be in concert with the will of God. But how many people in this world can say that they are living entirely in the will of God? Very few.
Wow.
Mary, I'm curious, when you were just talking about losing your throat, I'm losing mine, losing your vocal cords. Was that after this experience of this life review where Jesus had shown you?
Oh yeah. No, this was only maybe 6 years ago.
Oh, wow.
How many?
No, this is relatively recently, 6 years ago, maybe.
How did it come back?
Well, I had to go and have a surgical procedure that injected something into my vocal cord. It's a long story. I mean, it's basically The same thing that people use to inject in their lips. You inject it
Botox?
into, no, it's a Juvederm. You inject it into the vocal cord and it brings them to the middle. So then, I mean, I still have hoarseness, but I can talk. So that's fine. But no, that was relatively recently.
That's amazing.
Well, I think that's important. I think it's really important because I think people who get enamored with near-death experiences sometimes think that those who come back now have these incredible lives and this incredible experience of heaven. But many times there's a lot of suffering on the backside, isn't there?
Yes, sir.
I would disagree. No, I would radically disagree with that. Going back to the idea that we come back and there's a lot of suffering. I would disagree because I think the beauty of making a spiritual transformation to trust is that there are still things that happen. People don't come back and have a life that is absent of any challenge. But the difference is we don't, I don't know if I can say we don't suffer in those challenges, but we experience those challenges differently. I mean, we experience death differently. We experience life differently. Anyone who has made that transformation, and personally, I don't think it requires a profound spiritual experience. But if you've done the work to make that transformation, I would say that yes, having challenges and being presented with problems is life. That's part of this whole journey because it does, every challenge pushes us and changes us and teaches us things in different directions. Or
it's one of the promises of Jesus.
Exactly. But
in this world, you'll have trouble.
Right. But I don't believe in this world you have to have suffering. I think suffering has this miserable negative connotation.
Well, that's
although,
despair.
believe me, I don't want
You're talking
more
about despair.
problems. No, I'm talking about suffering. I would say
okay. When your body, I ask you on a scale of 1 to 10, how's your pain? I had 10 for a week. You don't call that suffering?
I think there are different axes of suffering. If you're talking about physical pain, yeah, sure, that's one thing.
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about, physical pain.
Right, that is a different
that suffering.
Thing. It's one version of suffering.
What?
Yeah, just like there are different axes of love, there are different axes of suffering. Do I think that people come back and they suffer through life? No. Do you have physical pain? Yeah. I mean, I broke my ankle and skied 5 miles on it. Yeah, that was physical pain. That was intense physical pain. But one axis of suffering is emotionally suffering or spiritually suffering.
Right.
And I don't think that people who have made that transformation have that degree of suffering.
But what's interesting is some near-death experiencers come back and they are depressed.
Oh, everyone is. I was depressed for a year and a half. Howard, I'm sure, was depressed. People are depressed because it's like, oh my gosh.
Well, like
First
you said,
of all, you can't believe you're back. Like you can't believe it because you already were home and now you're back again. But on top of that, it takes a long time to figure out what happened to you, process what happened to you, figure out how you're going to come back to this earthly life. And then it's also very depressing to look around at, the world and realize like, don't you get it? Like, why is there suffering when there doesn't need to be? Why aren't people experiencing love? Why aren't people experiencing joy? It's frustrating. And yeah, I mean, I think universally people are depressed for a while. And then the day comes for most people when they go, well, okay, I have more work to do, so I better get after it.
Better figure it out.
Right.
You know, there was when Howard came back, of course, his first wife sort of left him because she remained an atheist and stuff like that. I'm very curious to know, how did your experience impact your family, say your husband and the children and stuff like that? How did you process that with them, or did you just continue live and didn't share anything for many years?
I didn't share. I shared with one friend, and I didn't really talk about it for many years because, um, first of all, at the time, and still, I guess, I felt that an important part of it was the fact that I was home, that I didn't have any desire to come back. And my kids are little. I mean, my youngest son was a baby. Um, and I didn't think that outside of being old enough to understand the context of that sentiment, I didn't think that was fair for my children to hear that they hadn't been enough. I mean, that's not something kids should hear in any context. So that was one of the problems. And then the other is I really don't think that uh, without this absolute trust in God's presence, God's love, God's plan, an absolute knowledge of life after death, I don't think that the burden of waking up every day and wondering if that would be the day my son was going to die is bearable. I don't think that my husband could possibly have borne that. I don't think anyone could. It's just not reasonable. And so, um, no, I mean, life kind of went on. I mean, I was subtly but pretty profoundly changed. I mean, my experience of life was very, very different. And so it did change our family. It did. I mean, it's difficult to know how it changed because I don't know what it would have been absent that. Um, but it was tough. I mean, my husband is an awesome man. I mean, I was a spine surgeon. He's an orthopedic surgeon. We had four little kids. He had his own medical practice. He was trying to maintain mine. He was like changing diapers. I mean, I may have only wanted to talk about spiritual things, but my husband has oftentimes said that, I was off talking to God and he was changing diapers. I mean, it's a very, very different experience. And he had a very different experience in terms of the fear of losing his wife and the guilt that men feel because he didn't protect me. No, it was a very, very different emotional experience. And I would say that it's only been in the last probably 5 years, 4 or 5 years. So, I mean, this is like 25 years later that we have actually been able to discuss it a bit. It's still very painful for him, very, very painful. And it's wrapped up also with my son's death. And um, he's a, deeply emotional kind of guy. I mean, it's a tough it's a tough thing to talk about. So I can talk about it with other people much more easily than with my own family, which is pretty typical of of big experiences.
I used to have a hard when you first told me your whole story. I mean, honestly, I walked away. I was like, Jesus, that was harsh. Why would you tell her
Yeah.
what's going to happen to her son? And it didn't make, I mean, it didn't make any sense to me until you told me that you were like stubbornly digging in your heels, not going to go back.
Right.
And is that and he showed you that for that reason?
Um, I think perhaps. I mean, that's why then I was given this whole list and, reminded that it was a matter of trust, reminded what I'd been shown in my life review. And, I think it also, by knowing about it ahead of time, I had 10 years to, you can never be prepared. Don't get me wrong. But knowing about it ahead of time did allow me to respond the way I had been expected. If this had come just de novo, I don't know. I mean, he and I had a really special relationship, and I don't know. That would have been very difficult.
Mm.
It was anyway, but um, I don't know. Again, you don't know what you don't know.
Mhm.
But I
But
was
that's
shown a number of
why,
things. I
that's
mean, I was shown a
why,
number of things. That was the most significant thing for sure. Um, but that could be a reason why,
and he
because
showed
I
you,
wasn't going to go.
yeah. Well, I thought I remembered you telling me that at one point, and
Well,
that the
I'm
reason,
hypothesizing. I
yeah.
mean, I did argue the point and said, no, I can stay. I mean, Jesus himself had already assured me that my husband and my kids would be fine. Uh, and so I did kind of say, look, I can stay. I'm good. I don't have to
Mhm.
go back.
And,
So perhaps that was a reason.
Mhm.
and that's something that's similar with Howard as well, because I remember Howard was also telling Jesus why Jesus was wrong and how he was right about the future, right, Howard? When
Yeah.
Jesus was showing you that the war was going to be ending and that it's going to end in a couple of years, you told him he's wrong. And do you want to talk about that a little bit?
Well, I just, since you brought it up, my experience was in '85. Um, as I said before, I was a baby boomer. Um, I lived my whole life um, under the threat of a nuclear war. When I was in high school, one of the things me and the guys used to talk about all the time was what we were going to do when the nuclear bombs were ready to drop. And if I'll just say this, the whole idea was what girl were we going to go and rape? Because we knew that that was the end of the world and the end of our lives, and none of us wanted to die virgins. Um, so that was our big plan, and the whole hippie thing, I think, was largely due to my generation knowing that the world was going to be wiped out any minute. And we all, when I was in college in the '60s, we all knew the world was going to come to an end. There was going to be a nuclear war, and there would be nothing left. You know, remember wonderful movies like On the Beach and stuff like that. Anyways, the whole I forgot where I was going with that. What
We're going
did
to
you
talk
ask
about,
me?
yeah, we're going to have to talk about Jesus. You arguing with Jesus that he was wrong about that because he told
Yeah.
you it
So,
wasn't going to happen.
anyways, what Jesus was trying to teach me and to show me was very different than what I had believed the first 38 years of my life.
That's amazing. That's amazing. Wow. And so, I mean, I know we've been going for what almost an hour and 49 minutes. That feels like
Oh
five.
my.
That feels like 49. That feels like 5 minutes. Talk about outside of time. I'm having a bit of a fanboy moment right now. I don't even know what to say. So, but I think
Eddie,
we should
Eddie,
go ahead.
I have one last thing to say. You ready?
Go ahead.
Jesus loves me, this I know. Come on, join in, guys. For the Bible
You don't
tells
want me and Mary
so.
singing with you.
No, I don't think so. But Howard, I want you to know, Howard, that it is because of your singing that song and the effect it had that when each of my nieces and nephews have had their babies and had them baptized,
Yeah.
I have had that song engraved on a little music box for them.
Oh, cool. Wonderful.
Because if they know nothing else, I want to make sure they know that song.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
That's amazing. That's incredible. I mean, is there any other questions or things anyone of you want to share before we sort of round up?
We could talk for hours and hours.
Yeah, we
we
sure
could.
can. We sure can. I must say, Dr. Marino, your story is quite fascinating. And of course, Howard Storm as well. Your story is quite incredible. I will say, I found when you were sharing about, the future of what happened with your son and everything, the first time I heard it, you could ask my wife, for months and months, I found it so hard to understand.
It's impossible.
Yeah, I mean, this is very difficult to digest, but even more profoundly, what I really loved was that you still went through the process, even though everything
Yeah.
that happened, you went through the process of grief, and you've helped so many people to find some comfort, in a time of extreme loss. And I don't know if you.
Now, I'm not going to claim that I happily embraced it. I mean, every day I woke up praying, please let the plan for his life change. I mean, I figure if Jesus can ask for the cup to be taken away, I can too.
Yeah.
But I think, you know what? I think that's such a great example, though, of the fact that it's not predestiny. If Jesus can ask for the cup to be taken away, but if it's your will, I'll still do it.
Yeah.
What
And
that tells me
good point, Mary.
is that there's this overall perfect plan, but it's not predestiny. God does have the ability to change the plan, change the direction.
Yeah, he does. One profound thing related to that is, it says that of the Pharisees who crucified Jesus, it says they rejected God's plan for themselves.
Yes.
Yeah.
Which is mind-boggling, because on the one hand, if you go read Isaiah 53, he was going to be crucified to pay for our sins. It was foretold. And I think what that says is that God already had a plan and he knew how it was going to happen, but still each individual could choose whether they would go left or go right. And if they went left away from God, he could still use that in his plan. If they went right and followed him, they're following the path he had planned for them.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, I was going to say that because it's I think in Corinthians it talks about if they had known, they wouldn't have crucified the Lord of Glory, and I think it connects to what Dr. Mary was saying.
You know what? Here's the thing. I mean, I understand what you're saying, and for those specific individuals, perhaps not, but. Like, okay, this is somewhat it's certainly not Christian dogma, but I actually think that Judas is an honored person in heaven, because I actually think early on he was the guy when God said, okay, who's going to do it? He said, you know what? I love you so much. I will do it. I will betray him.
I don't think so.
Because, John, here's the thing. If someone didn't betray him, there would be no death and no resurrection.
Well, I think someone would, but I think it's more like
someone had to do it.
Well, and I think Jesus said, like, there will be stumbling blocks, but woe to the person who causes one of these little ones to stumble. Like, and I think we're back to the conundrum of God's sovereignty and our free will and how they work together.
Well, which is what I was going to say actually, was that even in the worst picture, for example, Christ on the cross, it turned out to be something quite beautiful when you remove it 2,000 years or when we look at our time right now and we look back at the cross, thank God
Right.
for the cross, right? Because Jesus didn't
Right.
just take our sins, but also he got resurrected from the dead and defeated death eternally. And that was more the point I was sort of going through, that all things do work together for our good, and God makes all things beautiful in his time. So even if we don't have the full knowledge of why things happen, God has that full knowledge, and he has a
Right.
better plan and a better perspective in the end, it seems, at least from what we both see in scripture and all the near-death experiences. I mean, if basically the two of you didn't come back, we wouldn't even be having this discussion
Right.
today, So
True.
I think you're coming back. It's such a, to me, it's number one, it's an incredible honor to talk to two people who should have been dead in the 80s. Or 90s. It's quite fascinating. But number two is that you're bearing witness to the person of Christ, his death,
Yeah.
his burial, his resurrection, his nature, his heart. I think it's an incredible privilege. And
Well,
all
and Jesus showed Mary exactly that verse you just quoted. Didn't he, Mary? You told me that one
Yes.
time. It's like he showed you event
Again
by
and
event that
again
you,
and again. Yeah.
yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
that's amazing.
Well,
That's
thank you guys for having this conversation today.
yo, thank you so much for coming to this amazing podcast. And basically, if you want people to connect to you, how can they get in touch with all of you? I know with Howard is on howardstorm.com, and also his YouTube channel. With Dr. Mary Neal, how do we get in touch with you or see some of your stuff?
drmaryneal.com.
Okay, drmaryneal.com. Fantastic. How about yourself, John?
Imagineheaven.net.
Imagineheaven.net. Fantastic.